life ministry leader. And a year ago, I was asked to go to a Archdiocese Respect Life meeting down in Boston. I just got to Boston. In Atlanta. And it was about women's health and natural family planning. Well, I think I'm in pretty good health. I didn't think I needed that, and I certainly don't need NFP. So I kind of debated whether I'd go or not, but I did go. I felt called to go. And I met this amazing woman, and I was so touched by her faith, her conviction to life, and her knowledge of...
Mr. Nurse, I am not from Atlanta. I went to Franciscan University of Steubenville, which oddly enough, I know Geneva from my dorm, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, I'm from South Carolina, and I took a job in Atlanta. Worked at Children's Hospital, the Children's Healthcare Atlanta, for 10 years as a nurse. But and now I'm home with my kids, doing teaching natural family planning. That's what I do in addition to being a mother, so and a wife. But so I was asked to speak on the genius of femininity. You might have heard the term the feminine genius. Beautiful term. It's kind of a popular topic right now. And I'm going to talk about how that relates to our bodies and our health. And I'm going to talk a lot about the physical aspects of our femininity. But I'm going to start with this quote from Venerable Fulton Sheen. I have a friend of mine that has really introduced me to him, and he's just amazing. But to a great extent, the level of any civilization is the level of its womanhood. When a man loves a woman, he has to become worthy of her. The higher her virtue, the more noble her character, the more devoted she is to truth, justice, goodness, the more a man has to aspire to be worthy of her. The history of civilization could actually be written in terms of the level of its woman. So, what do you think of when you hear the term feminism or femininity? Feminism, actually, more. Does anybody have any good? What's your preconceived ideas of what feminism is? It can be anything. No answer is wrong.
Don't let the guy open the car door.
Yeah.
Women in control.
Women in control.
I like having the car door open.
I know, right? I love that.
Yeah, that's part of being feminine.
Yeah.
That you can open the car door for me and show me respect.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I think for us, being active part of the society and be accepted with our opinions, our leadership, and that we can bring really a lot of, more like the old times that we were more look on the side.
Right.
We can bring a lot of good things to the society now.
Right.
Family and work space. And
Yeah, there's a beautiful balance of femininity and feminism, and then there's the pendulum going kind of off the track a little bit, and we've got we want to be better than men, we want to be the same as men, we want to have not just the same abilities or be able to do the same thing and same rights, but to be men and push them off their roles, push them out of their roles. So that's a common...
Yeah, and I think we bring a softer side as feminists, because we're feminine, we bring that softer side into a team.
We do.
Whether it's home, whether it's work, whether it's church, we just bring, God brought us up to have that softer side, so we can bring that in and bring balance.
We can't. So can we be Catholic and Christian and feminist?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're called to that. We're called to be feminine and a woman, and that's who we are and who God made us to be. This didn't go right.
But I think that culturally, that's what people mean. I don't actually think that that's what feminism is, but that is culturally. When somebody says she's a feminist, they usually mean she wants to carry her own luggage, she wants to open her own car door, that kind of thing.
anti-man.
Yeah.
Right. So the church calls us to feminism in a different way.
Yeah.
We're called to be this feminine genius that we are. We're made in the image of God. We're made to be a woman. And we're called to be feminists in a sense, stand up for ourselves and do things that we're called to do. And not only, oh y'all, this isn't transferring right.
Okay, you'll handle it.
No, yeah, this quote didn't, I'm going to read this from here because it's on here but not there. So I follow several Instagram people, the Catholic feminist, femme Catholic, stuff like that. And one of them posted this quote that this is actually what really struck a chord with me. When I was in college, I took, I don't remember what the name of the course was, but it was on feminism and Christian marriage. And yes,
Yeah.
yes, it was feminism of some sort, or the genius. I don't remember what it was called, but and the one thing I took away from that class was we're not just extra, we're essential, we're important. It's super important that we're part of society. We have to bring our feminine genius into society and influence it, because without that, there's no balance. And we see what has happened over the centuries, and it's not been good. It's not been good, and we have to participate. So she says, too often the feminine genius is talked about like the chocolate sauce on a sundae, like an awesome addition rather than the essential, irreplaceable, and foundational element in our work in church. But you know what? Our Catholic Church actually teaches that man plus woman equally together reflect the image of God in the world and the church. We are an essential half to an eternal whole. We are an essential half. We're not just extra. We're not just, if you have time while you're raising your kids, or you're, if you have time to participate in society, we're called to that. But what does that look like for you? It's going to look different. I love that. It didn't work out. It's on here, but it's not there. What does it look like for you? And this is what Dr. White actually, was it Mrs. White? There was a Dr. White and a Mrs. White. Can't remember which one. Anyway.
It was Donahue White.
Donahue White, okay. So what she said when she introduced, it was mind-blowing to me. We're not just called to be, we're called to be part of society and participate in society because society needs us. Civilization needs us. It's necessary. So what does that look like for you? It might look different than the man's world. And we're mothers. We have that special Mary, exactly. I mean, we have people throughout, history, St. Joan of Arc, St. Catherine of Siena, Mother Catherine Drexel, Mother Teresa. Happy feast day to Mother Teresa. Do what?
Dorothy Day.
Dorothy Day. I mean, so many saints that have gone before us, so many people. But there are people now living in our world today that are really influencing society, and they are necessary. You are necessary. The ordinary woman is necessary. You were created for so much more than just being, not standing out, not stepping up, not showing your talents and your feminine genius. So John Paul II was known for this feminine genius that we talk about. He says that it is only through the duality of the masculine and feminine that the human finds full realization, that complementarity, that balance, the kind of the yin and the yang, in a sense. Do you guys have any input on what is where does your husband or the men in your life, where do they balance you? Where do they? It's so necessary for society, for our world. Have you ever worked in a place that's all women?
Yeah.
I have. I'm a nurse, and then you see a man walk down the hall, and you're like, oh my gosh, finally, just bring some testosterone over here. We need that balance. It's so important.
I think husbands bring us strength in different ways. Like they can steady us sometimes when we are emotional, and they can remind us. I mean, I love it when I am in pain and my husband, I'm ready to break down in tears and just kind of fall apart, and he can come over and pray for me, and he can, remind me it's okay. Or when a catastrophe or something crazy happens in the family, a medical emergency or something, and he's the one that's steady. I'm not unsteady, but I tend to, I'm like, okay, I need to get it together. I'm going to call him or talk with him, and then we kind of balance each other out, and then we can make a plan. So I think that, husbands and wives are different, but it's important to have both of those.
It's important to have both. So qualities that he says that are unique to women are receptivity, sensitivity, generosity, and maternity. Of course, men can have that receptivity and sensitivity and generosity, but women are kind of known for it. Women only can be mothers, right? Men can't do that. That's not something that's ever going to happen. And in this search, as I was kind of preparing this, I was like, what is it that, what's a masculine genius? Because, men are made in the image of God. We don't want to just throw them overboard. We want them to be part of our lives too, but currently we're trying to okay, we need to put women where they belong and not, at the bottom. So I did a search for masculine genius, and there really isn't one. He didn't talk about it. So what is a masculine genius? What are those? And you kind of talked about that. What are those things that that men have? What are those strengths? Because we have to recognize that, and we can't just throw them overboard. So one of the things, I found a post about this in my search, and one of the men said, well, I know what a masculine genius is. It's knowing that the correct answer to any question is yes, dear.
Smart guy.
But there was a whole list of stuff, and I thought that was a funny one. We're also called to, through this feminine genius, through the theology of the body, we're called to love people and use things, not use people. That's kind of why we've gotten to where we are. We're using people as objects to our satisfaction. We're not looking at them as images of God, persons made in the image of God. And as we go through this, you'll kind of hear more about objectification of women and objectification of people and humans, and how it's important to love people and use things. Matt Fradd actually uses that in his, I think he has a podcast called Love People, Use Things. And he talks a lot about pornography and how that, how to avoid that problem. And then, of course, society needs women. Very important. We need them equally. We need to participate. And what that looks like for you might be the ordinary, just getting stuff done in your family in the way, we in my house divide and conquer. It might just look like that. It might look like, what might it look like? Where you're singing at the events and you're bringing your femininity and your music to a beautiful women's prayer breakfast and setting up these women's groups and whatever it is. So this is my family. This is my husband, Nathan. I have 3 girls. They are 11, 9, and 5. So we're entering the tween years. So we just started middle school. And so it's exciting. So when we, so a significant portion of the talk is on natural family planning and fertility and what fertility management is. But we learned NFP when we were preparing to get married, and I just went to take the NFP. We were like, we're taking NFP. There's no method that I knew about at the time, but we learned NFP in 2006 before we got married. We've used it throughout our 13 years of marriage. We've had 5 pregnancies, a couple of losses, have used it in all sorts of different scenarios and situations throughout the years, and have used NFP light versus, you get real serious at certain times. But this is my family, and a little bit to know about who I am. So have you ever heard when you go to a wedding, you hear, have you come here freely without reservation to give yourselves to each other in marriage, right? Will you honor each other as a man and wife for the rest of your lives? Will you accept children lovingly from God and bring them up according to the laws of Christ and his church? That's our marriage vows. That's theology of the body in a nutshell. It's the sacrament of marriage is an imitation of God's love for us. God loves us in a free, total, faithful, and fruitful way. He loves us. We are free to love him back. We are not forced in our marriage. We are free to love our husband. We come to the altar freely. It is a total love. It is a complete act of love. There's nothing held back. Faithful. In marriage, it's between spouses. God is faithful to us, undying faithful, just faithful forever. He will not let us down. And we're called to be fruitful in our marriage, to be open to the gift of life, just as God loves us. He loves us in a very fruitful way. So our love in our marriages, the love between a husband and wife, is imitation of that Trinitarian love between the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit is a fruit of that relationship. So how does that kind of apply to NFP? We've got the feminine genius, our femininity, this very big picture of what it means to be a woman. There's all sorts of different facets of femininity. I'm going to talk to you more about the physical aspects. Our physical aspects actually represent the divine and the spiritual. It's important to know and understand our bodies because they're divine. They're made by God, and they're amazing. They're a spark of wonder. And for some of you, you might not be, you maybe are single, maybe you're past the time of fertility. This will apply to you. There's all sorts of different reasons this will apply to you in your marriages. Your marriages should be entirely self-giving. You should be looking out for what's best for the other person. They're not selfish. You should never use another person as an object for your satisfaction. That's the gist of it. So I'm going to transition over to NFP. What do you think of when you hear the term NFP or natural family planning?
Catholic birth control.
Cycles.
She said
Lots of kids. Abstinence. Sometimes of abstinence. Periodic abstinence is a common term for that. My husband had to find that picture for me. Maybe the rhythm method. So not as many people talk about the rhythm method as much anymore. It's an older term. It's kind of, it's old school. So most of you probably never, even if you did NFP in your marriages, if you're past that age, you probably didn't use the rhythm method because we knew about cycle charting 50 years ago. Maybe crazy Catholic person. Oh, I had somebody when I was kind of at the beginning stages of teaching. She's a friend of ours from youth ministry, and she came over and she found out I'm teaching NFP. She's like, "Oh, you do that?" I'm like, "You should too." Like, I don't know. There's a reason the church gives us this gift. Mary said babies. So I do this course I do a version of this for marriage prep, and one of the guys very early on as I was doing this, he was like, "I think of the craps table." Like, well, I'm here to tell you that's not what it's like, but it's very scientific. And this one's a fun one.
She didn't practice what she preached.
But you know what? Maybe she might have been open to the gift of life. She might have been like, each time she might have wanted to have 8 kids. Just because you have 8 kids doesn't mean it was an accident or a surprise. Children are never an accident, right? They're always a gift. But it's the mindset. It's, just because it doesn't, maybe they didn't have, maybe they weren't good at NFP. Maybe they really didn't want 8 kids, but maybe they did. We don't know.
Or maybe God wanted them to have.
Maybe, and they accepted those children lovingly from God, as in our vows, right? So I think of healthy body, healthy mind, healthy spirit. So for those of you maybe aren't married, you're like, why are you talking about NFP and marriage, and what does this have to do with me? Well, I think of health. I think of your women's health, overall health. It's so important to know how your body works, right? Right? We go work out, we go to the gym, we are on, what are your favorite diets? Anybody have any good diets? I'm always looking for good diets, right? I want the one that's not hard, right?
Yeah.
So there's no diet that's easy, right? So when you look for something, when something is good for you, it might not be easy, right? So I think of healthy body, think of taking care of yourself, I think of your overall health. I also think of NFP being, what are we doing to not, it's not contraception. So the church teaches that we're not to use contraception. So what are we supposed to do? What's the answer? So NFP facilitates mutual respect, physically and emotionally upholding the human dignity. You have to look out for what's best for the other person, and it's teamwork, and you have to want it. You have to be motivated. And NFP removes abortifacient potential when you're family planning. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. It keeps the mindset of the couple open to the natural order, the way it's supposed to be. You know that having sex is for babies, right? Did you know that? I'm serious. Like, people have, their 4th kid, they're pregnant with their 4th or 5th kid, and it's like all over the internet. They're jokes of, do you know how that happens? Like, sex is for babies. So it keeps your mindset open that that's what fertility is. Calls us to conscious parenthood, to be aware of our needs of our family, the needs of society, the needs of those around us, our responsibility to God. So there's the term responsible parenthood, conscious parenthood, different. I think Janet Smith actually uses conscious parenthood when she talks about when it's appropriate to use NFP to avoid pregnancy. Just being aware of, we're given this gift of reason, right? And knowing that, there are times where it's important to maybe space your kids, or maybe you for your health, you need to maybe try to be done having kids. Actually spoke to someone yesterday who was diagnosed with breast cancer last year, and she's 30, and what's a girl to do, right? So we're called to make conscious decisions about parenthood and look out and be responsible. It seeks treatment for the root cause of problems that cause infertility. So maybe you're trying to have a baby, you're not trying to avoid pregnancy, but you want to have a baby, but you want to do it in the right and moral way. But you also want to figure out what's wrong. You don't want to just go straight to the IVF clinic, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too. But we're not going to go straight to saying, oh, we're totally broken and we want to just do this the artificial way. Figure out what's wrong. So natural family planning is the church's answer to all of these fertility things that we have going on. Wanting to, that says no contraception, but, okay, well, we got to come up with something to, God gave us these cycles, right? So let's learn about them. Do you see the church's teachings as a set of rigid rules? Is that in your, do you think that? Sometimes. The church's teaching on this is hard. It's not an easy teaching to accept and understand. Sometimes you're like, oh, I wish, your friends are all sterilized, It'd be so much easier, right? But the church wants what's best for you. It's not a bunch of old men laying down the law because they think this is just, why would you want to do something that's difficult? They want to make it harder for us. No, it's not a bunch of old men doing this, right, to us. It's a beautiful, beautiful teaching that the church has, because it knows what is best for us. it knows that this is a gift. And it's foundational to living a fully authentic life. We don't want to just shut down our bodies, shut down our fertility, and say that babies are not part of this. We don't want to shut down God. We don't want to shut out God, no. So natural family planning can be used to avoid or achieve pregnancy. It can be used for infertility, while breastfeeding. So there are protocols with all natural family planning, most methods to help you get through the stage of after you have a baby until your cycles return. Can use it during perimenopause, so the years between the age of 40 and 50 are usually very crazy with cycles, and it's nice to know and be prepared for that, so you can learn about that through fertility awareness and charting your cycles. And you can use it for irregular cycles. You might have irregularities in your cycles, and you actually can use NFP then too. There's this myth that the rhythm method didn't work because it didn't work for women who had irregular cycles. And most women had an irregular cycle here and there. So it's just so common to hear people say, I can't use it because I have irregular cycles. Well, what does that actually mean? It might not. I've talked to a lot of people, they're like, I have irregular cycles, but it's irregular by 3 days. Well, that's not irregular, that's totally normal. You can use it for health monitoring and looking at, you can look at your chart of cycles and say, oh, there's a health problem here, and get that fixed before you even want to have babies. And then you don't have a problem getting pregnant. So a lot of people are able to.
I have a question on,
Yeah.
on that, I'm past beyond
Yeah.
all of them.
She has friends.
You know what? This applies to everybody. This isn't just because you're past the years of fertility. We're going to talk about why this applies to you. This isn't just, it's not just about being fertile. There's more to it.
Right.
So
My question is, okay, when you said it applies to like your health and that you, by monitoring all that, what happens to the young women that have
endometriosis.
Right away, doctors want to give them birth control or whatever hormones to, like it says, supposedly estrogen and all that.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
So that's actually about 3 slides from here. No, that's okay. No, it's a really good question. What about when you have a health problem and the doctor says the pill's going to fix that? The pill's not going to fix anything, people. The pill doesn't fix a single thing. It shuts down your system, so whatever problem you have is just silenced. And then you come off the pill and you still have the problem, probably worse, because you never fixed the problem to begin with, right? So that's, woo. And Wyatt.
There you go.
So NFP means being open to life. I'm going to get more into that because it is. We're using cycles, we're using charting to understand our health and to figure out what's wrong when there are problems. Because, people have cycle problems. It's, irregularity by 3 days is not a problem, but there are real true cycle problems that need to be addressed. And it's super important that they know what's going on and get the help of a physician that can treat it and not just shut down the system. So NFP means being open to life, not separating the unitive and procreative meaning of intercourse. Babies and bonding, they go together. If you take one piece of that away, you're using each other as an object for your satisfaction or your needs. You're avoiding the use of withdrawal barriers, hormonal, non-hormonal contraception, sterilizations to interfere with your fertility. Doing anything actively to stop the natural purpose of intercourse is immoral. It's using you're using the person for. I was actually flipping through my theology of the body book and I realized it's just I had notes from my classes and I was like, but I actually had the word mutual masturbation written down. When you have sex and you take away the purpose of sex, like you take away that openness to life, what are you doing? You're looking out for sexual satisfaction. you want to be satisfied, it's for you. It's not a gift of yourself to the other person. It also means avoiding assisted reproductive technology. So that's really popular right now. You can't get pregnant in a few months, maybe a year. You just walk yourself down to the clinic and start the infertility treatment of, making the baby in a petri dish, right? So IVF, in vitro fertilization, IUI, and any other technology that requires conception to take place outside of the marital act. We are people that are meant to be conceived within our mother's womb and within the act of love. Children are not a burden, and they are not a right owed to us. And I know that is so hard to accept and understand. I have a dear, dear friend who has, she's been married a bit longer than myself, and they've adopted 2 adorable children, but never been able to conceive. And that, they're Catholic, they've followed the church teachings, and it is a hard thing to go through. And there's Organic Conceptions is a group that is out there to help meet the needs of women who are suffering with infertility and that emotional challenge and burden. But we do have treatments for it, and we can help. There are ways to, most people actually do have success with conception using NAPRA technology or some sort of getting to the root cause of the problem. There are still some people that have to carry that cross of infertility, and it is hard. But we have to remember that children are not owed to us, they are a gift.
It's our job to give them back to God, too.
Correct. And I've had to do that twice. It's hard. It's hard. So the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, and we have to accept that. It's hard. Attention to it is to avoid pregnancy. Abstinence, right? You have to not have intercourse when you're fertile if you're trying to avoid pregnancy. So abstinence, like absence, makes the heart grow fonder, right? I like that. It means figuring out ways to make each other feel loved that doesn't involve intercourse. Sometimes those flowers or the notes or the special surprise dates or the binge watching a TV show or whatever it is are more special and bonding than intercourse is. It may be. Intercourse is special, it's very important, but it's nice to have that time and to have that renewed desire to be together after the time of abstinence. So there's just some fun pictures of people going on dates, doing things special, making each other feel loved. And it doesn't end after you get married. Yeah?
So the question that I always get challenged with about NFP that I don't know how to answer is, why is it fine to have sex when you're pregnant? Or
it's a great question. That's a hard?
Can someone?
No, that's a good question, because you're not putting anything between you. You're not intentionally trying to avoid pregnancy, right? NFP is just timing sex so that you can achieve your either avoid or achieve. And so you don't have to use NFP. Nobody has to use NFP, right? But having sex,
why can you do this?
Right? When you're postmenopausal and you're not fertile anyway, why is it okay? Well, you're not doing anything to interfere with that natural order, okay. Right?
It's giving a gift to each other.
Right. You still can participate in the unitive aspect of it. You've already been procreative, right? And it should be open. You can't get pregnant when you're pregnant, right? Can't get any more pregnant, right? You're already pregnant. But no, and when you're postmenopausal or you're infertile, yes, you can still give that gift of yourself entirely as much as you possibly can in that time. Yes. So it's the natural order. It's not interfering actively with the natural order. I know it comes up a lot, yeah.
That's one of those ones that gets thrown.
You're like, what? Well, you're not interfering with the natural order. That's the answer. Okay. So how does NFP work? I'm going to get some nuts and bolts. And this is charting. This is fertility. This is your woman's body, the genius of the women's body, the actual practicals of our femininity. So we know sperm from the man unites with an egg from the woman. You have a new human life. Life begins at conception. I'll go over that one again in a minute, but life begins at conception. When the sperm enters the egg, forms a chemical bond around the egg, and no more sperm can get through and you have a new baby. Man is fertile from puberty until he's in the grave. I have, right? They are. So, exactly. I actually had a couple, probably 2 or 3 couples over the years, in the recent years actually, they learned NFP. I've had a few men that have been the involved party. They're like talking to me about their wife's cycle, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. But I had one man, he's like, well, I'm the one that's fertile all the time, you know, I should have to do this, right? So he did all the charting. The woman would, so I teach Marquette and we do urine testing. And so he would do the urine testing. Like, she would collect her urine, leave it in a cup, and be done. That was all she did. And he did everything else. I thought that was just the funniest thing. So, but I think it's great. I'm like, so then I go to my husband, I'm like, hey, I taught this couple, so I'm going to start leaving my urine cup out for you. And he's like, oh my gosh.
That's full participation.
It's full participation, exactly. You know, the couple league teaches couples that the man should take the woman's temperature, right? So the man takes the woman's temperature, and he's the one that charts it. He records it. He's in charge of the temps. He sets the alarm. He sticks the thermometer. He does that part. So that's what couple league teaches. You know, the urine testing is kind of, hey, I mean, if it logistically works out, we're a divide and conquer family. I take care of that. He takes care of the roaches and the garage stuff and the yard and the trash. He does the trash. That's like the recycling. Oh my gosh, I hate breaking down boxes. So, in relation to natural family planning, you can't get pregnant 24/7, right? Like all the days. So sperm can live for up to 5 days inside of a woman's body. So that's what we're trying to figure out. How long sperm can live up to 5 days inside of a woman's body. And here's the woman's body, this feminine genius she is. The woman has 2 ovaries, 2 fallopian tubes. And you see on the end of the fallopian tubes these little fimbriae. They're little finger-like projections that suck up the egg when it's released from the ovary at ovulation. Suck up the egg into the fallopian tube, and the egg will then be fertilized in the top third of the fallopian tube. And then it takes 6 to 9 days to travel down the fallopian tube into the uterus and implant into the uterine lining. So it's a fun little process, but it takes 6 to 9 days to travel down. So if you start your period before that 6 to 9 days is over, that's going to be a problem with infertility, which is a super easy infertility problem to fix. But if you chart, we're not going to have, you know ahead of time, and then you just totally take away the suffering that's involved with why am I not getting pregnant. So, you know that there's an issue. So that's a actually quite easy problem to fix. So you have the baby will then implant in the uterus and grow there for the remainder of the pregnancy. You see the musculature around the uterus. That's what contracts with cramps and contracts when you're in labor. And then this is the cervix. The inside of the cervix is super important. I don't know, it's kind of a hidden organ, but it's super important for fertility. If you don't have healthy fertile mucus, you don't have a place for the sperm to hang out while it's trying to wait for the egg to be released. You have to have the mucus is produced. Does anybody know that mucus is involved with? It's kind of a gross term to use all the time. Okay, you know about mucus, right? Okay, so cervical mucus is one of the signs we use for identifying fertility. When you're fertile, when your egg is ripening, you produce a bunch of cervical mucus. And this is produced in these crypts, these little indentations in the cervix. And during the fertile time, you have different types of fertile mucus. You have mucus that weeds out bad sperm, protects the sperm, nourishes it, and then when you get close to ovulation, the mucus will help transport the sperm to meet the egg. This is and then the sperm will hang out here until it's time to travel to meet the egg. The vagina is where sperm is deposited at intercourse. The vagina is very acidic unless you have fertile mucus present. So if you're not fertile, sperm can only live 1 to 2 hours. If you are fertile, can live up to 5 days. So that's how we all came to be, is because, you know, it'd be really like stab in the dark if we could only get pregnant within that 24-hour time that the egg lives, right? It would be
The picture there, I've heard, actually, I saw it on Downton Abbey, where they,
I love that show.
they put a stitch. The woman was having a hard time
Holding the baby in, the
So they
cerclage,
put a stitch
in the cervix,
at
yep.
the bottom of the cervix.
Yep, right there.
Do they still do that?
Yep. They do that, and then there's some other treatments I think that there are out there for that. But that's if there's a problem holding the baby in, like the cervix is weak or something, yeah. I believe they still do that. They do. Okay, yes. That I don't actually deliver babies, so. But no, that's a good point. The cervix is where they do the cerclage to hold the baby in if there's a problem with maintaining the pregnancy there. And then the vulva is right here, and that's the external part of the vagina where you feel and sense the moisture from the mucus presence, and that's one of the things that we can use for determining when you're fertile or not fertile. A woman is only fertile for 24 hours. So her egg, once it's released, is only alive for up to 24 hours, and then it's gone. So if you don't catch that 24-hour window, right? So thankfully, the sperm can live a little bit longer. You have a little bit of a window. So ovulation is the main event. How many think the period is your main event, right? It's like the stuff we see, it's the part that we experience, right? Ovulation is the main event. The ovulation is what makes you have a period. You can't have a period if you don't ovulate, right? You can bleed from some hormone changes, but you can't have a true period unless you ovulate. And you can't have cycles without ovulation. So when a baby girl is born, she has all the eggs she's ever going to have in her ovaries. And each month after she reaches puberty, one egg fully matures and is released at ovulation. This is kind of the life cycle of an egg from the beginning of the cycle to the end. So here's your period right here. The uterus sloughs off when you have your period. That's what the bleeding is. That's the beginning of your cycle. As an egg is maturing at the beginning of the cycle, it's producing the hormone estrogen. So then the riper the egg gets, the more estrogen you have. The estrogen has a job. It's going to produce that cervical fluid that we see when we're fertile. It's also going to start to ripen the lining of the uterus and prepare it for implantation. Then the egg, very ripe egg, once it's ready to be released, the pituitary gland in the brain releases the hormone, luteinizing hormone, the LH. LH is something that we can detect with at-home urine testing. We can actually test estrogen as well, but LH we can detect with at-home urine testing that says that, you know, if you've ever heard, this is more common than the estrogen, is the OPKs, ovulation predictor kits you can get at the drugstores and Walmart and stuff. Anybody heard of those? OPKs, they're getting more popular these days. Used to be, okay, most everybody's heard of temps, nobody's heard of the OPKs. Now we're moving along in technology here. But so OPKs are what is responsible, or what's looking for the LH, the luteinizing hormone surge that happens right before ovulation. The LH surges about 12 to 48 hours before ovulation, and we know ovulation is going to happen if you have an LH surge. So that has really helped us tremendously in charting our cycles. So all of you people who took your temperatures every day, you don't have to anymore. It's so amazing. So temperatures are great. I actually have a lot of people that do incorporate temps into their cycle charting, but LH hormone testing is just so helpful and so easy, and it just makes identifying ovulation much easier. So the luteinizing hormone surges 12 to 48 hours before an egg is released, and then the remainder of the follicle will collapse on itself and form what's called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum will then dry up that cervical mucus. It's going to produce that progesterone. So you've got high estrogen before ovulation, and then the progesterone rises from this corpus luteum. And that dries up your cervical mucus, raises your body temperature. So women who are taking their temperature every day, when your temperature goes up, your ovulation has happened because your progesterone rises. And then that maintains the progesterone for rest of the cycle, maintains the rest of the cycle. So, and then at the end of the cycle, so this stays high for about 12 to 16 days, and then at the end of those 12 to 16 days, all the hormones drop off. If you did not conceive, you start all over and you have a period. Totally like mind blown right now. It's a lot of information, but ovulation is what is the most important part of your cycle and what we're looking for. So if you say your period is late, well, maybe it's late, but maybe you ovulated late. So that's what we're looking for. These are the hormones that we kind of talked about. We've got the LH. So here's a 28-day cycle. Let me orient you to what this is. This is a 28-day cycle, kind of average length of a regular cycle. Ovulation would be right here in the middle. So you can see the LH surge right before ovulation. The estrogen rises before ovulation, and the progesterone rises after ovulation. And your temp shift happens after ovulation from the progesterone rise. It's a fun little graph there. This is just a fun, I don't know. Who thinks of the fall when they have their period? I don't know. So, but it's a good way to remember it, right? So in the fall is your period, in the winters, kind of, some women don't have this phase, and to be honest, I'd be happy not to have the winter anyway. But in general, the winter, I don't like being cold. But it's supposed to be funny. Anyway, so some women do not actually have this phase, a very short cycle. Ovulation comes on the early side, and so they might not have a dry phase after their period. But either way, you will still have the springtime with all the mucus and fertility, and you can make babies. And then after ovulation is your temperature goes up in the summer, and everything dries up, and that's the rest of your cycle, and we start all over again. So how does NFP work? Man and woman together, biologically fertile for only 6 days per month. So it's a miracle we're all here, right?
I don't know, there's a lot of girls that get pregnant really quick.
I mean,
They're married or not.
I mean, for real. Well, you know what? God gave us this like desire for sex when we're fertile, right? That estrogen just makes you kind of crazy. It makes you very sexy.
I think it makes him crazy too.
It does. It does. And so it's a, kind of no surprise that people get pregnant pretty easily whether they're trying or not, because their desire for sex goes up when they're fertile, because that's the way God made it, because sex is for babies, right? So that 6-day fertile window, we call this the fertile window. The time that a woman and a man are fertile together is the fertile window. And that is the day of ovulation. So the egg can live for 24 hours, and the 5 days before ovulation, because sperm can live for 5 days. So NFP is not the rhythm method, although the rhythm method, for people who are clockwork, maybe could work. It does work for those people, but for a certain amount of time. So we know that the fertile window is going to be longer than 6 days if you're trying to avoid a pregnancy. If you're trying to get pregnant, you want to figure out when are those 6 days. And if you're not trying to do anything, you still want to figure out when ovulation happens, right? If you're just trying to chart your cycles for your health. So the fertile window is going to be longer than 6 days. The fertile window can change from cycle to cycle. And the difference between NFP and the rhythm method, call it science, because science is what gives us all of this information. So we talked about irregular cycles a bit, and every woman can have, and this is why, again, the rhythm method's not the best choice for everybody, because a lot of women have variabilities in their cycles. Your bodies can, your ovulation can be responsive to stress, diet changes, exercise. All sorts of things can affect when you ovulate. If you have just like the same old everyday routine, you might have a very stable cycle, and ovulation is going to be at the same time every month. But if you have, stress can make you ovulate early, stress can make you ovulate late. After you have a baby, your cycles are super crazy. when you're going through perimenopause, your cycles are super crazy. So there's all sorts of variabilities that can go into play. But what this is showing you is that, so the red days, those are your period, if you kind of gather that. This is a 29-day cycle. And the fertile window, the 6-day fertile window right here, ends when ovulation happens on 15. There's some days of infertility before, and then there is what we call a luteal phase, the time after ovulation when the corpus luteum is kind of taken over. The luteal phase is 13 days in this cycle. Did I count that right? 13 days, yeah. And here's a short cycle. Fertility starts early, ovulation happens early, still have a 13-day luteal phase. Same number of days. And here we have a late ovulation. Delayed ovulation, maybe, and this is, personal example. School started a few weeks ago, and I was supposed to ovulate, but I didn't because school started. And if you've ever had 3 kids in all different schools, and well, actually not all different schools this year, but the start of the school year is kind of crazy and stressful. Christmas season, the end of the school year, traveling, all sorts of things can cause stress in your life. And if you're about to ovulate and stress is happening, your body's like, wait a minute, this is probably not a good time to make a baby. So your body kind of just delays ovulation a bit, which may be good, may be bad for you. But it might delay ovulation, and you're going to have a later ovulation, but you're still going to have the same number of days from ovulation until your next period. So that's super interesting. So you're never going to be at Six Flags unprepared for your period. You know that you're right? You know that your period's coming, so you should be prepared. You go on a trip, you know your period should be coming, and you have what you need. So normal luteal phase is 12 to 16 days, but almost everyone's, once you determine what your length is, it's almost always the same every cycle. And there are hormone things that can happen that can affect that, and that is also a problem that charting will identify, and you can be directed to a physician that can help you with the proper support of your cycle if that is not happening. So, does anybody have questions about irregularities there? Okay, so different ways to chart your fertility. Can someone remind me how long I have? What is the time? 11:45. Okay. So our natural signs of fertility are, we can use past cycle formulas, kind of like the rhythm method, but now for identifying ovulation, we can use the formulas based on ovulation versus the cycle length. You could take your temperature every day and identify when your ovulation happens based on the progesterone rise. You can observe your cervical mucus changes. You can also test your female hormones, urinary female hormones. So this is what your mucus changes might look like. So you have, usually most of your cycle, you have either, if you're not on your period, you have a low mucus observation, maybe just a little bit of something that's every day or nothing at all. Once you start becoming fertile, you have mucus that you can probably pick up and stretch. Maybe you feel wet. You have around ovulation a peak mucus sign that's very clear and fertile and slippery. And then after ovulation, you have a sudden abrupt change back to no mucus or very low mucus again. So you know the day before was probably close to ovulation. So it's pretty easy to chart your mucus. It's free. I mean, you can always pay attention to it and be like, oh, that didn't cost me anything. And once you know it, you always know it. It doesn't go away, or it's not something that you can forget. So even once you know it, and even if you don't want to, you're like, oh, we want a baby, we don't really want to do anything, you still know when you're fertile because the mucus is there, right? You can check your hormones. Take your urinary hormones every day. So we use this monitor called the Clear Blue Easy monitor that actually detects the estrogen rise and the LH surge that we talked about. It will produce a low, high, or peak reading. So it's super easy. Men love it because they feel like something other than that subjective mucus sign is giving them information. And it's really great to just have something that it's magic. It really is. Oh, it's a gadget? It's magic too. It really is. It's really great. I've actually always used a monitor since we got married. I was fortunately introduced to Marquette at the very beginning, but I have a lot of people I work with who didn't know about Marquette. They had to do a lot of Google searches and chat room groups to tell them to come across it. And they're like, oh my gosh, why is this so hard to find? Well, we are lucky in Atlanta. Dr. Raviel actually brought Marquette to Atlanta because she was so involved with the OBGYN people and brought Marquette to Atlanta. So we in Atlanta have been very, very lucky and blessed to have this information, have had it for a long time. So.
I have a question. So women that cannot conceive, they don't go through any of that?
No, this is actually marketed to women trying to get pregnant. So if you're trying to get pregnant, this is also a great tool. So if you're trying to figure out when you ovulate because of your irregularities, this is a great tool. It doesn't matter what your intention is. We want to figure out when you're ovulating because that's women's health. That's important. Ovulation is a sign of health. It's a vital sign. It's very important to know when you ovulate. So this is just another way to detect ovulation. So there's also at-home ovulation predictor kits that you can use, but the Clear Blue monitor is what we actually really encourage people to use because we have a lot of research on it. So here's basal. You can take your temperature every day and graph it on a chart. Now there's like all these gadgets out there that are great for temping. There's temps. There are thermometers that will just shoot the Bluetooth temp right to a chart. There's ones you can, right? Don't you wish, right, that you knew about? There's an app for that. There really is. So there are apps that will just shoot that temperature right over to a chart, and you don't have to actually graph it yourself. It just goes in there. There is a thermometer that you can wear called the Temp Drop that kind of identifies your temps all night long, and it just shoots it to an app. So there's all kinds of great things with technology and femtech out now right now.
I was just going to say, like, if you have kids waking you up throughout the night, that's not a good, reliable way to do it.
Yeah, temps are really hard when you're up at night. You have to take your temperature at the same time every day. Super important.
If you have night sweats, does that affect?
Night sweats, you should still be able to do temps, but I'm
talking about the monitor.
Oh, the monitor? I don't know. The temp drop, I don't know because it's actually a pretty new product. So I don't know how it affects temps as far as the graph.
Like in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's supposed.
I check my temperature in the morning, but I still have night sweats in the middle of the night where I know.
I know it's got some magic built into it that figures it, that averages it all out. Okay. So.
Okay.
I don't know. That would be a question for the company, for the temp drop company. I don't actually know that answer. But so types of NFP. Do you guys know names of NFP? What methods are out? What methods do y'all know of? Creighton.
EVT.
Basal body temperature, symptothermal. So, and then Marquette. Okay. So there's calendar rhythm methods that look at past cycle data to predict future fertility. So there actually is a rhythm method out there right now that is 95% effective. It looks at, you have to have very stable cycles to use it, but it's called the standard days method. And we use cycle beads. And this method was actually, Georgetown University has actually produced these two methods that are very, very simplistic, very easy to use, easy to learn, and they're really marketed for the underprivileged, the people with low economic, abilities, and maybe low education. So it's just an easy method to learn. It has a 95% effectiveness at avoiding pregnancy. So you can use rhythm methods in a sense, but you can also use past cycle ovulations to predict future fertility as well. So there's ovulation methods, which is Creighton. So there's Creighton and Billings is a mucus-based method. So we look at mucus signs to determine when you're fertile and not fertile. So that's your body signs. We call that biomarkers. And the Georgetown 2-day method also takes into account mucus changes. And that's a very simple method to learn. There's symptothermal, which is couple to couple league, and Northwest Family Services, and they take into, they incorporate mucus and temps. And I think even Northwest incorporates calendar rules as well. So it's nice to have calendar rules because it kind of just hard stops, tells you when you're fertile without having to use your subjective signs. And then there's hormone monitoring that tests for estrogen, LH, and now we actually have progesterone testing available. And we're really at the beginning of a femtech explosion. We've got an UVA monitor coming out. We've got the Mira monitor coming out. We've got all kinds of great hormone testing devices on the market that we're testing. We're actually beginning a pilot study on this new Mira monitor that gives us a quantitative number for estrogen and LH. And they're going to add progesterone eventually. So, and the Marquette method is what is being used, is doing all the research on this right now. So, and the Marquette method, just to kind of be clear, Marquette actually incorporates any combination of these signs. So you can do symptothermal version in Marquette if you wanted, but most people come to Marquette because we teach the hormone testing. So, and that's
which is the best way, or does it depend on the individual?
It just depends on the individual's desires. I mean, hormone testing's not free, right?
So in the meantime, you're gonna have 4 kids.
I mean, you could. You could, trying each one and seeing what works best. I mean, and people do. I've taught. No. People do though. They go through all the methods and then they're like, oh my gosh, so I'm going to have to. But people wait to do hormone testing until they're like, a lot of people will wait to incorporate the monitor because it costs money. I mean, you have to spend the money on the monitor and on the test sticks every month. So there's an expense to it. So you have to decide how important is it for you to have an effective method.
Method has the monitor.
We use the monitor, and it's a research-based method, so there's just continual new evidence and research that gives us information about our fertility and how the method works for family planning or health, not just family planning, but health overall.
Well, that's what I was, because I'm at the twilight of
Yeah.
whatever my age is. Hormone monitoring, okay, as you get towards menopause, past menopause and all that, you still want to know what your levels and things are on your estrogen and whatever is. Do people still do that? No.
Once you're past menopause, you can actually once you've gotten to the point where your cycles are so long and irregular, so many months between cycles, you're probably infertile, and you can go to a physician and have FSH levels, and I can't even remember the other hormones that are checked. But they'll do blood work to tell you if you're even have an egg reserve. So at some point you find out that, oh, I'm not even fertile. Congratulations, you've graduated from NFP. So
What are your hormones like then?
So when you're after menopause, that's something that, as far as checking your hormone levels, these monitors would not give you any information, because all it would say is you're it would say low. It wouldn't give you any information. So
I just wondered if it would help with your mood.
If you're not in cycles, so that is something. So you would need to go to a gynecologist that will work with the whatever hormone therapy. And I am not a specialist. That is not my specialty. I don't know what the actual best treatment plan is for that, and I don't know, bioidentical hormones. I don't know if no hormones. I just can't answer that in a effective way. So, okay. But there are, once you get to that point, you're looking for something different, because you're not charting cycles, because you don't have cycles. So you're doing something different. Okay. So, and then my cycle is irregular. I hear that all the time. My cycle is irregular. I can't do NFP, right? Anybody else heard that? Ovulation is a vital sign. If your cycle is irregular, you need to chart. Your irregular cycle could mean you have cycle problems. You have something going on. Your hormone panel, your hormone balance is so important for your overall health. If you have an untreated PCOS or endometriosis is extremely painful, so you would need to get help. You would need to go to a physician who can treat it and not just shut down the system until it's way worse. We don't shut down our GI system when we have stomach pain, do we? No. We fix the problem.
When you say shut down, what are you saying?
Birth control pills, hormone contraceptives, IUDs. Those are like the treatment plan that most gynecologists will be like, oh, you have irregular cycles, let's go on the pill. but that just shuts your system down, because I'm going to tell you, I'm running out of time.
Is there a site and a link that has like nationwide OBGYNs who actually
Yes.
will treat like?
Yes, actually, yes, there are. Well, in Atlanta, we have Dr. Sotomayor and Dr. Conglasa, who both are gynecologists that will help, that do that you can go to, that you can trust, that they're not going to be like, here's the pill and that's your only answer. And so NAPRO technology is essentially the term you want to look for. On my personal website that I use for teaching, I have a link on medical resources. So there's a practice in Houston, a practice in Washington, D.C., and then there's practices kind of sporadically all over the country. You kind of have to word of mouth. You get on those Facebook groups and be like, hey, I'm in this city. Where do I find who do you trust? That's probably if you're in a totally different city. There's a link on my website for NAPRO, which is what I'm NAPRO technology consultants, who are mid-levels, so like nurse practitioners or physician's assistants or doctors who understand the treatment protocols for cycle problems. And so that's kind of the terminology you want to look for. Who's your NAPRO person? So Pope Paul VI Institute is in Nebraska, Creighton University, but my understanding is their website's not the most up-to-date for practitioners, so some other practitioners have given me a link that's more current, but it's practitioners all over the world, really. Okay. So that's a great resource to find physicians to help. So when you have problems with your cycles, even if you're not trying to conceive, you need to get help and get your cycles looked at, and you need to chart your cycles so that you can figure out what the root cause of the problem is. So irregular cycles are a sign of problems. Then you can be at risk for diabetes, heart disease, and other abnormalities and problems later on in life if you don't get your cycles under control. So effectiveness of the method, it's so important that NFP works, that what we're using works. Research is super important. I never loved the statistics classes, but let me tell you, when you're trying to avoid pregnancy, you want to know what, and it's important to you, you want to know it works, right? So we look at this guy, Trussell. Mr. Trussell, he does a lot of research on effectiveness of family planning and contraceptives and stuff. He's actually not an NFP guy, but he put out some studies that looked at correct use and typical use. Correct use is somebody who uses the method perfectly, gets instruction properly, charts their cycles, and uses the method as it's instructed, and does not break any rules. And then the typical user, we want this number to be high because that shows you how easy it is to implement. So if the method is hard to use, you're going to have a higher typical use effectiveness because, like, I love mucus signs, but mucus is kind of subjective. It's not super easy to it's not always super easy to interpret. It's subjective. It's not a black and white answer sometimes. And a lot of people second guess themselves when they chart their mucus. So that explains why we have a higher typical use effectiveness for an ovulation-based method. You can see chances 85% across the board. That's just doing nothing and just not avoiding or trying to achieve or anything. 85% chance of getting pregnant each cycle. And then the spermicide, withdrawal, condoms. And we know condoms actually aren't researched when you're fertile. And we know we're only fertile for 6 days per month. So is this really right? Is it really going to prevent pregnancy if you use it when you're fertile? Like, is it going to be that high? I mean, statistically speaking, you're only fertile for 6 out of those 30 days in the month, right? And then standard days method, 5%, 12%, and then symptothermal, Marquette, and the pill and the IUD. So many people have the IUDs in. It's so common. So who knew?
What does the IUD do for periods?
Well, first of all, the pill and contraceptives, when you have a bleed, when you're on a contraceptive, it's just,
But the IUD,
it's not, the IUD is,
doesn't
Well, when you're on the pill, those periods that you're having, they're not periods. They're just like making you feel like you're having a period. It's not a true period. It's just a bleed because you're not taking the hormone at that time. Because the IUD is in all the time and you don't have a period.
Hormones in it?
Yeah, you don't have a period.
Stops periods, the IUD does?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was how it worked.
Well, sorry, I'm kind of getting tight on time here. So as far as, I felt like I had a lot of time. It's like slipping out. So how do you choose a method? So when you want to get started with a method, you can just search NFP Atlanta. Even if you're not local to Atlanta, even if your friends live in another state, you can still go here because a lot of archdioceses or dioceses have a website on how to find an NFP instructor. This one's really nice because it has a small blurb about each method and what it is and how to find an instructor. And we have instructors for all the methods in Atlanta, and that is not the case in a lot of cities. So this is a great starting place for finding instruction. As far as picking out a method, how do you get started? How do you know what method? Ask a friend. There are Facebook groups for NFP users. Ask on those. A lot of times it's your friends that help you get started. Do your research on the internet. I'm not saying learn the method on the internet. I'm saying figure out what speaks to you. Do you want to buy the monitor because you like the objectiveness, or do you want to just keep it simple? You're not really trying to avoid, or maybe you do want to try to avoid, but you just want to keep it simple. There's all sorts of different ways to get started. And just remember, over the course of your fertility, you're not marrying your method, you're marrying your spouse. You can change methods. You can make changes in your plans. Online learning, there's a lot of teachers that teach online because Marquette, but NFP in general, you might not have an instructor close by. And a lot of instructors I actually teach only online because that's where I have a significant portion of the people all over the country that just are looking for Marquette instruction. So I do entirely online, but there are some people that will meet you at a parish, some doctor's offices. You can learn on Marquette and Couple to Couple League both have online learning self-paced tools. Actually, Marquette it's closed right now, but there is some information on their website, but it's not. It used to be a little bit more self-paced. But Couple to Couple League has an online program where you can learn like self-paced, do it, and then maybe ask questions of an instructor. Apps are not NFP. Apps are not a method. Apps are a great tool for charting, but they are not a great tool for avoiding a pregnancy if that's your goal. They might help you they might help you collect data and put it on a chart. My personal favorite app is Kindara. There's also a Fem app. There's several apps out there that are pretty great to use, but you absolutely have to choose a method and follow the method if you're trying to avoid a pregnancy. You can't use an app alone. It all sounds easy, but what are our roadblocks? Why is it hard? What challenges you to get started with NFP? Or maybe you've started and you're like, oh, this is so hard. This is so awful. Cycle changes. It's hard to be consistent with little kids. It is hard to be consistent with little kids.
And after you're pregnant, it's like a nightmare.
After you've had a baby?
Yes, right after.
After you had a baby, it's so helpful to have an instructor. That's, and who knew? Like, I grew up in a community of people that, like, they knew about getting instructors. Most people don't know that. Most people are like, they just stumble upon it, and then they start Googling it, and then they learn it from a Google site of some sort. And then they're like, come across a chat room that says, oh, my instructor. And they're like, oh, there's instructors? Like, that's how a lot of people come across instruction. So it's up to you guys, every one of you, to tell people that, not just it may not be necessary, but if somebody's really wants to be successful at it and have a good experience with it, to find an instructor, because that is going to be your most, wrap it up, huh?
When you're done, I want to say, would you what would you say to the women who have had some kind of permanent, like maybe sterilization, maybe the husband had a vasectomy, and they want to be faithful Catholics, but they never knew that that was wrong when it happened.
You know what? That's a really good question. There's a couple of ways to approach that. If, you know, in a conversion experience, yeah, it might not be in your budget to go and have a vasectomy undo the vasectomy, because that can be done. Some people do it to have that authentic experience within their marriage. It might not be reasonable, but you can still practice periodic abstinence through NFP. You could do something, you know, as a woman, you still need to chart your cycles, even if your husband has a vasectomy, because you need to know how your body works and you need to know how to chart your cycles. And you can then, through the healing experience of, you know, confession and going through that process, you can still practice NFP in a sense that will incorporate the beauty of our feminine bodies within your marriage.
And I would also say, like, as a penance for that, you can spread the word about this.
About NFP.
Beautiful way.
It is, like, you don't, I mean, I would encourage, if it is possible within your marriage, to have a vasectomy reversal. A tubal ligation is a little harder, but you can have a tubal ligation, you know, undone. But you can have a vasectomy reversal. I think that I know that in Gainesville, Georgia, there's a physician that does that, and that's like, I can't remember what the name of his website is, but I know that, you know, Google will help you there. But
tubal ligation reversal now. Back in the day when I became Catholic, they wouldn't. But what I didn't know was that when I became Catholic was that you can't use any other birth control. You can't use, you know, anything but this. I didn't know that was a sin. And so, all the other stuff. And so I think that's important that we all know that. And so what I did was went to confession and said, I'm sorry, Father. You know, I had no clue.
you had no, and that's what's happening in our culture is, you know, people don't know.
Yeah,
They don't know.
When you take the classes and stuff, it's not something that's taught, which probably is a good idea, but it needs to be taught at some point that, you know, that's important to know. And it may be now. I mean,
it depends. I mean, it depends on your experience with marriage prep. That's where we try and get get the information out. But I mean, it's not really being preached at the pulpit. And is it appropriate to preach at the pulpit? How do you preach this at the pulpit? Like, we have to teach our friends. We have to tell our friends, like, we can't be quiet about this. This is important. This is about souls and about your marriages and about your relationship with God. So it's hard, but we have to share the message, and it's up to us. It's an intimate topic. It's hard for priests to talk about it because they don't experience it. There are some that are very good about it and understand it and do preach about it. But I mean, if you kind of look at it from their point of view, you know, it's up to us to share the message too also.
Go to confession, you have it. Do penance by spreading the message or living that way. Those are great ways to open up your soul, so that God's grace can come forth.
And also, is it, you know, I went to we had a vasectomy, it's permanent, go to confession. Is that an authentic confession when you're like, okay, well, we'll get it, because this happens, we'll get a vasectomy, then we'll go to confession. This is a thing. So, like, how do you then go through, was that an authentic confession? And then, you know, if it's, you know, I know it's a lot of work to go through the reversal process, but that's a healing thing for people within their marriages to go through that. And it doesn't mean you want to doing it to have more babies. You're doing it to have that authentic marriage relationship. So what can I know it's I'm supposed to be finished. I have just a couple more minutes, and I'll try to wrap it up. Is that okay? Okay. This is like the really important stuff that I wanted to get in about what's going on with the pill and the IUDs and IVF and stuff. So we want to understand what's going on. What people are using right now are the pill, IUDs. I mean, condoms, patches are kind of out because I think of some FDA thing. Maybe they're back in. I don't know. I can't keep up. There's so many. Implants, I mean, I can't even imagine. Sterilization, IVF, IUI. These are all things that are going on. Our friends everywhere are doing this, right? Life begins at conception. We already mentioned that. Life does not begin at implantation. There's a kind of a push to make people think that you go to the doctor and, you know, every so often someone will come in and say, oh, I don't want to take the pill because it's abortifacient. Well, the doctor will be like, well, no, it doesn't end a pregnancy, because they're defining pregnancy as after implantation. If you look at the Plan B box, it says does not cause an abortion. You know how they get away with that? They've redefined when life begins. So this is an important thing to know in your conversations, is life begins at conception, when the egg and the sperm unite and all of the components of the human are there. All the chromosomes are there. You know your gender, you know your icon, all of that, right there at conception. Implantation is what they're doing. So that's what's kind of the terminology. That's the word, what the doctors are using as the beginning of life.
Does the egg always implant? Sometimes it
No.
doesn't even implant, right?
Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes just naturally you conceive, maybe your luteal phase is too short, you start your period and then no way for implantation. That happens, but that's, you know, part of the natural order of things. But how contraceptives work. So I'm talking about hormonal contraception and IUDs. Contraceptives are supposed to suppress ovulation. They prevent you from ovulating, so therefore you're not producing an egg. I mean, who really wants to stop? I can't get over that. It just stops your body from working the way it's supposed to work. Changes your cervical mucus, so sperm can't survive. It thins the lining of the uterus, so a fertilized egg can't implant. There's your abortifacient right there. So you've got a fertilized egg. Maybe your luteal phase is too short and the baby doesn't implant because of the natural process. Or maybe you're on a pill that causes your uterus to be hostile to life. So it's so important to know that the hormonal contraception will prevent implantation. The copper from IUDs act as a spermicidal. IUDs produce inflammation and cause your body to be in the constant state of inflammation. There's copper IUDs that actually, some people complain that there's copper toxicity from that. And then there's the Mirena and there's some other names too, but the Mirena is the most common, and that has actually a hormone in it that sometimes stops ovulation, but it also causes the inflammation that causes your fallopian tubes to not be able to transport the sperm to meet the egg, cause inflammation in the uterus, so the baby can't implant. I mean, and it also, what was the other thing that it does? Oh, I had somebody a couple weeks ago that called me that had a tubal pregnancy with an IUD in, because it slows the motility of the fallopian tube. So even if you do conceive, it can implant in the fallopian tube. So I knew that's a little bit more common with the IUD, but she got pregnant with an IUD in. Did you see those statistics about the IUD? She still got pregnant with an IUD in. Isn't that wild? But we don't know how often these abortifacient effects cause the loss of a life. We can't know that. That's not a number. There's no number, no way to predict, to determine that. But we know it happens. We know a lot of people still do ovulate despite being on the pill, and the hormones may not suppress ovulation, but despite that, it might prevent implantation. So what is artificial reproductive technology? We have IUI, that is fertilization of an egg outside of by sperm that is collected from the man. So masturbation, collect the sperm, inject it into the woman. The woman has to be on all these hormones to receive the sperm and get pregnant. So that's IUI. And so that is conception takes place outside of the marital act. Masturbation is, we all know that's wrong, right? That's, using yourself as an object. A woman is hormonally prepared to receive semen injected into her uterus. In vitro fertilization is where fertilization occurs in a petri dish. So you collect the sperm, you collect the egg, fertilize the egg in the petri dish, and make the baby, or many babies in a petri dish. So what happens when many babies are conceived in a petri dish, but you only want one or two? Well, now you've objectified the baby, right? It's an object for, you know, how's that? you feel like you earned that, you know, like what is that? You concern of multiple babies conceived. So A, are you going to implant all of those babies in your uterus? You're going to get pregnant with 10 babies? 8 babies? Okay. What are we going to do if we don't implant all those babies? What happens? They freeze them. Who pays for the storage of it? When do you decide to stop paying for the storage of your babies? Got all these babies. This is a problem, guys. This is like happening, and we as a church are really struggling to answer it. We have people that are going through conversion experiences after IVF, and they're like, I have all these babies. What am I supposed to do? Like, it's morally illicit to implant the babies because it's not the marital act. It's morally illicit to kill the babies. It's like, what do we do? We really are stuck. Our church is really struggling with this one. Like, how do we? It's a mess. It is a mess. What if you get pregnant with 6 babies? Some people don't want to be pregnant with 6 babies. Selective reduction. They abort those babies. Some of those babies. They're like, oh, you don't deserve to live. And you don't deserve to live. Then, of course, we have the long-term concern of egg storage. We talked about that, the cost of storing them. And then, of course, masturbation is required to obtain the sperm. So those are our general... So fertility is a gift from God, not a right owed to us, not a burden. They're gifts. When you use NFP, you should have that mindset that each time the fertile window rolls around, you have the ability to be co-creators with God. You recognize the awesomeness of the fertile time and that you're making new images of God. This isn't just like, I want my boy and my girl. You know, this is eternal. This is forever. You know, I'm the mother of 5 children, but 2 are in heaven praying for us. You know, like, this is eternal. This is forever. And the baby is a gift from God. So I want you, hopefully you've learned something today. I want you to go out and share this message. So I listened to this, did anybody follow the Seek 2019? All the talks are on YouTube now. So Father Mike Schmitz, he's a great speaker. He has a really great podcast. I love his because they're kind of shortish. He, in one of his talks, gave the thing that will change the world, change the culture, and advance the kingdom of God is friendships and families. You're not going to learn it from the pulpit. Your priest isn't going to be able to tell you the ins and outs in NFP, but your friends will, and you will share the message. And know that there are resources out there. I talk to people every day, multiple times a day, about NFP, and I love answering questions and talking about it. This is one of my favorite. Actually, the Annunciation image has always been my favorite. And recently, I've really been into this visitation. Mary going to visit Elizabeth. She just found out she's pregnant with God, right? And Mary goes and travels all this way to visit her cousin who's pregnant and help her at the end of her pregnancy. We are sisters. We help each other to be women, build each other up, and help each other to complement the masculine genius as well. It's a dual thing. We're not in it alone. It's not just us. We're not trying to rise up and shove men out of the way. We want to build both men and women up to be the men and women we were created to be. The world needs you to be who you were meant to be. And I didn't realize St. Edith Stein was her works and writings actually influenced theology of the body tremendously. So as I've preparing for this, I learned that. I was like, Pope John Paul II wrote a lot of theology of the body, and a lot of his stuff kind of came from her writings. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.